Hi guys, Olive here today to do my August 2017 wrap-up. Total in August, I read 9 books, and I'm very excited to tell you my thoughts on them. The first book that I finished in August was What We Lose by Zinzi Clemens. I really enjoyed this book, so much so, in fact, that I gave it its own full review. I will link that video in the description box below if you'd like to see it. Then I read 3 books off of my Nook e-reader for the Read Your eReader Readathon that was happening the first 2 weeks of August. I've been trying to encourage myself to read more off of my e-reader, so I definitely was looking forward to participating in this. The first book that I read is less of a book and more of a Kindle short that was called Intrigue in Capri by Ashley Weaver. This was basically a short story and took place in between the 3rd and 4th book in this Amory Ames Cozy Mystery series. The 4th book is due to be released in a couple of days. I have it on my September TBR. I have it on pre-order. I'm extremely excited to get to it. I really enjoyed this Kindle short, this short story. I thought it was really fun. I will admit that it probably won't make much sense to you if you've not been keeping up with the Amory Ames mystery series, but it definitely made me even more excited to read the 4th book. If you've been keeping up with the series, it's definitely worth a read. The second book I read for the Read Your eReader Readathon was Owl and the Japanese Circus by Christy Cherish. I first heard about this series from Sana from Inkbones Books. This is an urban fantasy series that follows an ex-archaeology student named Owl who has been unceremoniously forced out of her grad program. After this experience, she is left with a bad name, but also a particular set of skills which she uses to become an international antiquities thief. She just has one firm rule for her new lawless existence: no working for or with supernatural creatures, until she unknowingly breaks her own rule and finds herself on the run from vampires. To get these vampires off of her back, she has to accept a job from an even more fearsome supernatural, a job that's scope grows wider and seems to become more dangerous the further she digs in. This book is definitely outside of what I typically read. I can't say I very frequently pick up urban fantasy, but I had a ton of fun with it. It did seem like there was a fight scene like every other second, but I don't know if that's typical of the genre and I'm just not used to it. Owl, which is a nickname by the way, can be very frustrating since she is admittedly not good at dealing with people, but I found all the characters to be really realistic. They all had their own strengths, weaknesses, things that annoyed them, things that made them annoying. This is definitely one I'd recommend, and I am certainly planning on keeping going with the series in the future. And the last book I read for the Read Your eReader Readathon was On Cats by Charles Bukowski. This is a collection of previously unpublished poetry and short musings on cats, particularly the cats that Bukowski owned throughout his life, the experiences he had with his cats, and really the love he had for them. I enjoyed it overall, but it was really different than what I was expecting it to be. At times it could be really crude and gritty, and then at other times could be unexpectedly sentimental. If you love cats, or if you just really like Charles Bukowski, it is something I would recommend, but because it is such a short collection, I would definitely recommend trying to get it on sale or trying to get it from the library. After reading those books on my e-reader, I moved on to reading one of the books off of my classics I'd like to read in 2017 list. That was Appointment in Samara by John O'Hara. I chose this book to be on that list and picked this book up in the first place because it was compared a lot to The Great Gatsby. The Great Gatsby was my favorite book for a really long time, and so when I heard this book compared to it, I was like, yes, I would like to read another book like The Great Gatsby. It didn't go so well for me. This is the story of Julian English, a prominent citizen in a small Pennsylvania town. He's out at a party one night with his wife and a group of friends/acquaintances, and he starts to obsess over how much he hates this one bumbling buffoon of a dude. And he really wants to, toss a drink right in this guy's face. He brushes it off, seems to talk himself out of it, and goes on to have a particularly lovely drunken evening. Fast forward to the next morning when we as readers start to hear the townspeople of this Pennsylvania town gossiping how Julian English did indeed end his evening by throwing a drink in this guy's face. And not just like a little watered down splash of whatever, like this drink must have been hella fresh because the ice in it gave this dude a black eye. How big was this ice? Like this big? Oh, it's cold. Might as well. You'd really have to want it to throw a drink so hard in someone's face it gives them a black eye. Like, your aim's gotta be on point. Anyway, the dude who ends up with a facial contusion at the hands of a handcrafted cocktail happens to be an extremely influential member of the community, who everyone seems to owe money to. Suffice it to say, people weren't lining up to take Julian's side on the matter. The fatal mistake of throwing that drink precipitates Julian's downfall, which sounds like it would make for a tremendous story, right? If only the drink Julian threw was as watered down as the story, then the dude might not have been so mad. I was so bored by all of the side stories and all the towny gossip. I started to dread picking it up because I just didn't see the point. Like, if a book isn't going to have an enthralling story, then at least make it have a strong message, or vice versa. But this book was more like, hey, come watch this guy make mistake after mistake because you have nothing better to do, I hope. I probably totally missed the point of this book, but I honestly do not care. On to the next one. Thankfully, all the rest of the books that I picked up in August I really enjoyed, starting with The Mill on the Floss by George Eliot. This was another book off of my classics I want to read in 2017 list, and this was also the first George Eliot book I've ever read. The main characters of this book are a brother-sister pair, Tom and Maggie Tulliver, whose family has owned the titular mill for generations. We start to follow Tom and Maggie in their childhoods, and then continue to follow them as they grow up and face all the trials and tribulations that life has in store for them, including the loss of the family mill due to a loss of a lawsuit between their father and his mortal enemy, Mr. Wakeham. The family not only loses their mill, but goes bankrupt after the lawsuit, and Tom, who is barely even a man at the time, determinedly sets out to pay off his family's debts and to try to get their mill back. He also takes on his father's grudge against Mr. Wakeham, the man who caused them to lose everything. And he will not at all humor Maggie's attempts to have a friendship or even a little bit of a deeper relationship with Mr. Wakeham's son, Philip. This serves as one of many topics that Tom and Maggie do not see eye to eye on. Their relationship is definitely a contentious one. Their relationship is so interesting because they fiercely love one another, but they're so different and have such different outlooks on everything that they are constantly at each other's throats. I loved the language and the wit of this novel. It did not take me very long at all to just be completely absorbed in it. I even found some of the slower sections really interesting, particularly how Tom goes about earning the money back to pay off the family debts. He starts to go into investments, which of course perked my ears up. I had a particular soft spot for Philip Wakeham. At one point, he was classmates with Tom, even though Mr. Tulliver and Mr. Wakeham did not get along in the least. And that's when he first met Maggie and started to develop a fondness for her. Philip Wakeham's character has a physical deformity. He has a hunchback. So he's treated as an outcast. No one really expects him to get married. No one really tries to get to know him all that well. Furthermore, his father's business dealings, his father's very aggressive business dealings, certainly does nothing to win him any friends in the community, and certainly gets in his way when he's trying to court Maggie. Overall, I would say this is a book about how familial duty and legacy shackle us and keep us from achieving happiness by our own definition. The ending of this book is pretty widely disliked for a reason. It's bad. But it doesn't take away from the wonderful reading experience that this was. The next book I finished was a spontaneous selection, meaning not one off of my TBR, and that was Bioshock Rapture by John Shirley. I felt compelled to pick this up because my husband was replaying the original Bioshock game. He has since finished it and moved on to the second one, so I felt that I was in the correct mindset for this book. This book is a must-read for anyone who likes Bioshock, particularly the story of Bioshock. And when I say Bioshock, I mean the first and second games, because I pretend like Infinite didn't happen. This book serves as a prequel to the events of the first game, as well as a fleshing out of the events of both the first and second games. You learn how the idealist businessman Andrew Ryan, originally a Belarusian immigrant, turned his extreme objectivist idea of an underwater utopia free from government, taxes, and the fear of nuclear fallout into a reality. You meet characters that you may know from the game, but in the book, they turn into real people. You learn how they first met Andrew Ryan. You learn how they started to become involved in his Rapture project. And then finally, you learn what the city did to each and every one of them. You meet the man who becomes Frank Fontaine, the main antagonist of the story, and you learn just exactly how he was able to accomplish everything he did. If you've not played Bioshock, or if you don't even know the story, this book will spoil major elements of it for you. If you've never seen it before, I cannot encourage you enough to watch a Let's Play of it. It is probably my favorite video game of all time. Sure, it's heavy-handed with its political and societal critique, but I just love everything about it. The music, the story, the atmosphere, the voice acting, it's amazing. It shows just what can happen when laissez-faire gets out of hand. This book provided so much depth to the world of Bioshock and bridged the gap between the first and second games. If you are a fan of the Bioshock series, I cannot recommend this enough. The penultimate book I finished in August was The Diviners by Libba Bray. This was my replacement for my random pick off of my TBR for the month of July. I fell out of the mood for the book I originally picked, but since The Diviners was one of the 3 options that I had given to myself, I decided to pick this one up in its place. This is a YA book, which I can't say I was originally aware of before I picked it up, and it is the first in an ongoing series. I would classify it as a paranormal book. It is set in New York City in the 1920s. We follow a group of young people who become more and more interconnected as the story goes on, but at the center of all of it is a young girl named Evie O'Neill. Evie has a supernatural ability to see people's secrets, to look into their pasts, when she holds on to an object of theirs. It is this party trick that gets her into some serious trouble in her Midwestern town and causes her parents to ship her off to New York City to go stay with her uncle who runs a paranormal museum. When her uncle is asked to lend his spooky shit expertise to a serial murder investigation that seems to have a paranormal bent to it, Evie becomes involved, and we as readers start to get clued in that her group of friends/acquaintances might have some special abilities of their own. I did really enjoy this book. It's extremely fast-paced, really engaging. I had a ton of fun reading it, but I do have to say that some of the characters, specifically Evie, the main character, felt more like caricatures than they did real people. She used so much cliched 1920s lingo that it very quickly went over the top. For me, it felt like it was constantly hopping back and forth between being funny and entertaining and downright cringeworthy. Nevertheless, I did have a ton of fun reading this book, and I did find myself missing it when I was done reading it. It was particularly really great to read this time of year since it has some spooky elements, and since we're fast approaching fall and Halloween season, I thought it was very appropriate. So if you're in the mood for something like that as Halloween approaches, I would definitely recommend picking it up. I am definitely going to keep on going with the series. And the very last book I picked up in August was another one not on my TBR, because welcome to Abookolive, where everything's made up and my TBR doesn't matter. That was The Year of the Gadfly by Jennifer Miller. I love picking up a good campus novel this time of year when school is back in session, regardless of the fact that I don't attend school anymore, so this one was definitely calling to me. This book has a split timeline. In the first timeline, it is the present day, 2012, and we follow a high school freshman named Iris, who has been moved to a new town by her parents after having experienced something traumatic. Iris starts attending the prestigious private school Mariana Academy, and while the home that her parents bought in this new town is being renovated, she and her parents are living in the old home of the former headmaster of Mariana Academy, and Iris is living in his daughter's old room. This former headmaster's daughter, Lily, also attended Mariana Academy 15 years prior, and this serves as our second timeline. In this other timeline, we follow Lily as she attends Mariana, and also we focus on some of her classmates, including a young man named Jonah. Jonah grows up to be a scientist and is invited to come back to Mariana Academy to teach science, and he ends up being Iris's science teacher. But Jonah was brought back to Mariana Academy to do more than just teach. The new headmaster of the school needs Jonah's help to try to disband a secret society at the school. Jonah was known as a troublemaker back in his day, so this new headmaster believes that he may know where the secret society is hiding. But Jonah has his own secrets, and he also has a desperate desire to rekindle a flame with his high school crush. Meanwhile, Iris, who is not only Jonah's pupil, but an aspiring journalist, seems dead set on uncovering the secrets of Jonah's past, including the death of his twin brother. I ended up liking this book way more than I thought I was going to. I had some initial reservations because it is extremely similar in tone to Special Topics in Calamity Physics by Marisha Pessl. After I finished this book, I did still see those similarities in tone, but I do feel that this book had a much stronger story. This book is much less focused on one specific character than Special Topics was, so Iris is not nearly as central to this story as Blue was in Special Topics. I also found that the academic elements of them were very different, where Special Topics is very focused on political science. This book is much more focused on biology and journalism. If you liked Special Topics in Calamity Physics, specifically if you liked the tone of it, I would definitely recommend this to you. But even if you had problems with that book, like I certainly did, but liked the tone of it, liked the campus feel, I would still recommend this to you because where Special Topics was lacking, this book definitely delivered. If you'd like to chat with me about any of the books that I read in August or about anything in general, you can put it in the comment section below. Or if you'd like to talk with me elsewhere, I'm on a variety of different places on social media, and the links to all of my profiles are in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.